I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this interview with Carolyn Medeiros, Executive Director of the Alliance for Safe Communities here in Rhode Island. We're going to finish it up now by asking Carolyn a little bit about what she sees as the long-term goals and her long-term vision for the Alliance going forward. Carolyn, what's coming up in the longer term?
In the longer term, we're going to continue to try to sew up what we did this year with the registration of sex offenders in homeless shelters and identifying what address pending means or address unknown, and get clarification on that, which should be coming soon to a news theater near you. Also, we're going to look at other issues as well that are crime related. Nationwide, if you want to look at a big picture nationwide, we're seeing a breakdown where police are under attack. I'd like to point out, it was in May, Amanda Malkovich from the Providence Journal was the only one who did an article on 2 officers who went to Silver Lake on a call for 2 men on ATVs disrupting the community, riding all over. When they got there, it was the community plus those 2 guys that turned on the officers. They beat those officers up and they ended up in the hospital. That's a sign. I've gotten complaints from the city of Cranston with Cranston officers standing down at bar scenes outside parking lots where there's fighting and brawling and whatnot. I'm seeing a change that deeply concerns me for the future of Rhode Island. It's happening nationally and Rhode Island isn't immune, and I think we're going to start to see a little more dialogue about that. But there was never a follow-up story from Amanda Malkovich, and it was never carried on Channel 10, 12, or 6, and I find that very disturbing.
It is, of course, a threat to the safety of the community when the police become ineffective because the community turns on them. One of the things that I'd just like to ask you about specifically is that much of what you were talking about before with the sex offenders registry had to do with those offenders taking residence in homeless shelters, in treatment centers of one sort or another, and most of these are run by non-governmental organizations. I think that we would all understand that the state is trying to offload some of its responsibility for the care and feeding of some of these offenders, and in the process offload some of its budget responsibilities. But what does that mean to the NGOs? Are they seeing such good business out of this that they resist your efforts to make things safer?
Oh, absolutely.
How does that work?
Well, they are great lobbyists, and they pull on the heartstrings and push the humanity issues and make organizations like law enforcement, corrections, or the Alliance seem like we're demonizing and dividing communities with hatred or hostility. We're not. In fact, I represent victims of violent crimes. These are families and victims who don't have a voice, okay? Victims are becoming second to the perpetrators now. And these nonprofits, by the way, they talk about budget cuts and complain that they don't have any money. That just isn't so. There's millions and billions of dollars that Rhode Islanders aren't even aware of that was put in the budget, that's being given to them in grants, that's supporting them, from the homeless coalitions to House of Hope to the Institute for Nonviolence to Open Doors and down the line, and so on and so forth. There's plenty of money, and if the money is manipulated correctly, they can all work together, which I feel they are, and someone is mentally ill, someone has a drug problem. Either way, all these agencies working together will supply a bed and have the funding to do this.
So I think what I'm hearing is that there is an evolution of a partnership here between these private organizations who receive prisoners from the state and the state itself, the bureaucrats of the state, who probably find their job easier to do when they can shovel things off to these NGOs. So in that process, I mean, things like the sentencing guidelines that you talked about in our first segment had to be made to, as you said at the time, make a law to make you follow the law that was already made.
Yes.
And that is to try and to break that bond between pure bureaucrats and the non-governmental organizations that they work with.
Minimalizing crime and criminals is not going to benefit safe communities.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Now, so when I ask, is there some kind of contention for resources Your answer is no, the resources are being supplied, and the NGOs are very happy to take them as fast as they can get them.
I don't care how much whining they do. I know that they're getting, I've been tracking their money, and they're careless with their money. And a good example was Harrington Hall and what happened with 49 sex offenders, the $200,000 cost. Ironically, after we did our research, we presented our bill, it passed the Senate unanimously. One of the things that happened out of that is House of Hope, one of the nonprofits that ran Harrington Hall, lost their contract for Harrington Hall. It's now under Crossroads, and Executive Director Jean Johnson was relieved from her position. And I recently found out on July 20th, Jim Ryzek, the director of the Rhode Island Homeless Coalition, was also relieved of his position. So they're changing the players and moving them around on the chessboard, but the game hasn't been changed, Mark, and nonprofits are doing well.
Okay, and it sounds like, though, one of the great things that the Alliance is doing for communities to make them safer is to shine a flashlight on some of this stuff. It sounds like it came as a direct result of some of the news media attention that you yourself generated.
Yes, and it's very hard to do these days. It's getting harder and harder to get media attention on these subjects. It's what we're doing is becoming politically incorrect.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, we're coming down to the end of our time together today. There are a couple of things looming, and I'd like to ask you to just speculate on what might happen if there are some changes in personnel sort of at the top of our state hierarchy. There could be a change in the governor's office, depending on the outcome of the presidential election, and we might find Dan McKee stepping in to finish out Raimondo's term. That's certainly something that she's obviously interested in having happen. Are you familiar at all with Dan McKee, and how would that affect what you think happens down the organizational chart?
My hopes is that he would be fiscally conservative and be concerned about the investment in these programs, and that he would also take into consideration community safety and how these programs are run, where they're located, and accountability.
All that really means is you wish that he'd pay attention to this problem.
I want to see a change.
Okay. There may be a change in the speaker. If Steve Frias is successful in beating Speaker Mattiello in House District 15, then maybe there'll have to be a new one. We understand that Majority Leader DeSimone is also having his problems in a primary race. That, I think, leaves the field wide open. I think the possibilities are too big to consider or even to focus on one person right now. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
How about the Attorney General in 2018?
I would ask the Attorney General, why did you oppose a bill to register sex offenders at homeless shelters? And if you were gun shy because of the $1 million lawsuit regarding the sex offender residency location when it was moved from 300 feet to 1,000 feet, which the Alliance opposed, by the way, because Rhode Island's too small a state to think that you can go 1,000 feet. If that's what your concern was, this is apples and oranges, and you need to address what's going on in these homeless shelters.
As will the new Attorney General. Carolyn Medeiros, Executive Director of the Alliance for Safe Communities here in Rhode Island, I'd like to thank you for coming in again and giving us so much of your time and so much information for the viewers of Common Sense. We'll have to do this again after we see how some of this plays out, but for right now, thank you very much.
Thank you.